What's up, fellas? My name is Tucker. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the Dennis Schroder signing to the Boston Celtics. If you enjoy the video, leave a like rating on it and check out my socials right there. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, Dennis Schroder, one of the more interesting players certainly of the offseason. We came into the offseason, into the free agency period, thinking that Dennis Schroder was one of the bigger name players on the market. It wasn't a superstar heavy class, but ultimately I think everybody expected Dennis Schroder to end up somewhere on a relatively significant deal, whether that be in a sign and trade or otherwise. Once the Russell Westbrook trade went down, though, for the Lakers, that future became a little bit murkier. It became more difficult for the Lakers to come up with a sign and trade situation, and then all the money kind of dried up in free agency. And this is a player in Dennis Schroder that turned down an extension worth over $80 million during the season from the Lakers. And now he ends up in Boston on a one-year, $5.9 million mid-level exception deal, a huge step down from the extension he was offered during the year with the Lakers. So what exactly happened here, and how does this affect not only the Lakers, but as well as the Celtics this upcoming season? Well, it's pretty clear. He waited too long in free agency. I'd love to know if there were any other deals offered to him earlier in the process that he decided not to take. He waited and then all the money dried up, but probably most importantly, there are a ton of guards in this free agency class. I mean, think about the amount of guards that got big money. Kyle Lowry, DeMar DeRozan, Lonzo Ball, Spencer Dinwiddie, just to name a few, Evan Fournier. And Dennis Schroder either wasn't at the top of that list for a lot of different teams, or, like I said, waited too long and ultimately cost himself a ton of money doing so. And he bet on himself during the year. Like I said, a huge extension offer from the Lakers, $80 million for a team in the luxury tax and the salary cap position that the Lakers were in at the time. That is a significant offer, and it showed that they did want to retain him, but ultimately that's not the way it worked out. Now they've got Russell Westbrook, and Dennis Schroder ends up in Boston. And make no mistake about it, this is a huge, gigantic bargain for Boston. You can say what you want about Schroder, about how he didn't handle this properly and he's skateboarding on Instagram rather than, coming up with a team that he actually wants to go play for. But this is a gigantic bargain for Boston. I mean, $5 million a year for Dennis Schroder is incredible value. He turns 28 next month. He's still a young player. He was kind of just given away a couple of years ago by Atlanta. They kind of went from that 60-win Hawks team that had Jeff Teague on it. Then they transitioned to this Dennis Schroder-centric team. And then in the Melo deal, they basically just gave away Schroder for free. And a couple of years ago, he had a really good year in Oklahoma City alongside Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Chris Paul when they made the playoffs when nobody thought they would, with that three-headed monster at the guard spot. And the most important thing about that year for Schroder was that it was the best three-point shooting year of his career by far. He shot over 38% from three that year, averaged like 19 points per game. And in this most recent season for LA, he shot 33% from three. And that is really the indicator of whether or not Dennis Schroder had a really successful season or not. It is the consistency for him, not only overall, but especially from three-point range. And on a Lakers team that obviously has LeBron, has Anthony Davis, and needed the spacing that Schroder provided the year before to the Thunder, did not bring that to the table this year in LA. Again, it was an up and down season for him, but he is definitely someone that can get to the rim, provide perimeter playmaking, and even if the jump shot isn't falling, is someone that can cause rotations within the defense and create plays for others and for himself. Unfortunately, just didn't do it consistently enough for the Lakers, and again, was really relied upon for off-ball shooting, and he was not the only one on that Lakers team that struggled for the outside, but definitely struggled as a three-point shooter a year ago. But now we look at this Celtics roster, and it gets very, very interesting compared to where it was at the beginning of the offseason, because I think for a lot of people, myself included, it's been a disappointing offseason to this point for the Celtics. It's been a little bit quiet. They haven't really done a ton, but they kind of did their work early, and they kind of did some subtle stuff that I think actually needs more attention than even I've brought to it in some previous videos. The Kemba trade, they gave up a first-round pick essentially to dump Kemba Walker. They get back Al Horford, who certainly is not the player he was a couple years ago, but should be helpful. They get Josh Richardson for free. They just put him into the trade exception, and I know that Josh Richardson had a really bad year in Dallas last year and has not been the same since he left Miami, but we'll get to him in a second. They do lose Evan Fournier, but now bringing in Schroder, and when you look at the roster and the rotation of this group, it's very interesting. There's a lot of versatility. There's a lot of plug-and-play guys. There's a very clear hierarchy. It's very clearly Tatum and Brown. There's no Kemba Walker here that, I'm not saying Kemba was stepping on anybody's toes, but there's no debate about who the top two players on this roster are, right? So at the guard spots, you've got Schroder, Marcus Smart, who could still possibly be moved. You got Peyton Pritchard, Josh Richardson, who again, I know he's had a rough couple of years, But if he's hitting jump shots, he can defend, he can create a little bit, and if he can shoot, that is a really nice player to have as a two-way player on your roster. Tatum, Brown, and Nesmith, who's had some good moments in Summer League. Romeo Langford, same thing for him. And then the big spot, which was a huge issue for them last year, just finding some kind of consistency there. You've got Horford, you've got the higher upside guy in Robert Williams, and then Enes Kanter exists there as well. So this is kind of an interesting roster, right? There's versatility, there's flexibility. You can play big, you can play small. I don't know. I kind of like it, way more than I thought I would coming into the offseason, kind of knowing that there weren't really a ton of options here for Boston. But what everybody's kind of anticipating here for the Celtics is that this is all leading to, and one of the reasons why they were so quiet in free agency, a potential Bradley Beal move. The connection between him and Jason Tatum could potentially bring Bradley Beal to Boston, and Dennis Schroder might now be a part of that, where you can start to build a trade package that includes Schroder and Marcus Smart, Naismith, Langford, Robert Williams, a ton of picks, whatever you want it to be. It's much, much easier now from a salary and a contract construction standpoint to put together a star trade than it was over the last couple of years, because they pretty much only had Tatum and Brown on rookie deals at the time, bigger numbers, Kemba, Horford, and then Marcus Smart was like the one middle tier contract they had, who was making like 11, 12, 13, 14 million dollars a year. Then everybody else was on rookie deals, but now you've got Schroder that makes 6, Smart that makes like 14, Richardson that makes like 11, Horford with a bigger number. It's relatively easy now to put together a star trade package from a contract standpoint, and then certainly they do have some assets that they could move as well that potentially this is all leading towards. But even if that doesn't happen, I am intrigued by this roster. Maybe there's a bump here for Tatum playing for Team USA. He was certainly up and down, certainly inconsistent, but had some really good moments for Team USA. Hopefully Jaylen Brown comes back fully healthy. This is still a team to watch for me during the regular season in the Eastern Conference. I'm not going to stand here and say that Boston's going to be a top 3 team in the East next year or anything, but when you have the talent level of those two wings of Tatum and Brown together and some of the guys they've started to put together around them, I'm not just going to immediately count them out. I think there are still some moves to make here. If they did want to make a Marcus Smart trade, that would certainly be an option for them. They've brought in enough guards in Richardson and Schroder to potentially replace him should they need to move him for a big or for a shooter, whatever the case may be. And just overall, like this is a really, really cool group here, I think, now in Boston. So for Schroder, it's unfortunate the way that it worked out for him from a money standpoint. But if he plays well in Boston this year, he's going to have every opportunity next offseason to potentially try and make up for that, to make up for whether it be the agent making a mistake, whether it be him not taking the deal, whatever the case may be. It's going to be, a situation he's going to be allowed to recover from. It's going to be all about outside shooting, and some of those problems that existed in LA last year are going to exist again in Boston this year. Schroeder is going to have the ball in his hands some, but he's certainly going to need the space for guys like Brown and Tatum off the ball, and if he struggles to do that, maybe it's just going to be the same old Dennis Schroder, and that could potentially hold him back moving forward in free agency. But he is a guy to keep an eye on. He's a guy to keep, to kind of watch as a potential big year player this year in a contract year. A lot of times guys step up and play extremely well in a contract year. Maybe he'll be in Washington by the time we get to the trade deadline or something like that. This is just another wrinkle in what has been a crazy, crazy free agency period. Guys getting a ton of money left and right. We've got sign and trades being investigated for potential tampering. And then at the end of it all, we just had Dennis Schroder standing there looking around wondering where his big deal is coming from. And it's a lesson. It's a lesson for these guys, and it's a lesson for us as fans when we look at free agency, we look at the list of players, right? Just because there's a list of players that could potentially be worth $80 million over 5 years or $20 million a year. I think you could look at a ton of different guards of this free agency class and say, that guy deserves 20, that guy deserves 20, that guy deserves 20. If there's not enough teams to pay them that, someone's going to be left on the outside looking in. Dinwiddie got his, DeRozan got his, Lowry, Lonzo, they all got their big money. And Schroeder just happened to be the 5th guy on that list looking around wondering where all the cap space went. Fournier as well getting a huge deal as well. Just wondering where it all went. And so it speaks to how much teams value versatility and flexibility. And ultimately, I think what did Schroeder in was not only not taking the extension, but the inconsistency from three-point range. If he comes out next year and Boston shoots 37, 38% from three, averages 19 and 7, there's going to be plenty of teams interested in him in free agency the following year, including potentially Boston as well. potentially the biggest bargain on the market this year in Dennis Schroder going to Boston. He will absolutely be on the biggest bargains of free agency video that'll be coming up later in the week. With those things said, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, once again, my name is Tucker. Leave a like rating on it if you did enjoy it. Check out more videos from me, the box on screen. Check out my socials as well at the top of the screen. Hope you guys have an awesome rest of your day, and I will see you all next time.